In the ruins of an alien battlefield, human soldier Ethan Ross moved carefully through smoke and ash. The sky above was dark with storm clouds and falling dust, and the ground below him was littered with broken machines and dead bodies. The war had ended in this region just days ago, but the silence still felt heavy. Like the battlefield itself was holding its breath. Ethan had been sent to this area with his squad to search for survivors. Intel or anything valuable, most believed there was nothing left, only death and rust. But as Ethan walked away from the rest of his team, something caught his eye. It was a strange piece of metal sticking out of a crater, too clean to be debris, too smooth to be natural. He moved closer and brushed the dirt away with his glove. It was a pod buried deep. Its surface cracked but glowing faintly. A sign of power, a sign someone or something was still alive inside. "Hey," he called to his squad. "I found something." A few soldiers rushed over. They looked at the strange pod with nervous eyes. One of them, a man named Parker, stepped back instantly. "That's Carnari tech," Parker said. "Don't touch it, Ross. That could be one of them." The word Carnari made everyone tense. The Carnari were one of the most feared alien species in the galaxy. Ruthless in battle, deadly in silence. People called them monsters, demons, even nightmares. No one had ever seen one surrender. They fought until death and left nothing behind but destruction. But Ethan didn't step back. Something about the pod felt different, like it didn't belong in a graveyard. He reached out and pressed a button on the side. The pod hissed and opened with a soft metallic groan. Inside was a female. Carnari, her skin was pale purple. Marked with old scars and fresh wounds, her armor was cracked, her breathing shallow. Her glowing golden eyes opened and locked on him. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan felt frozen. His weapon was ready. But he didn't raise it. The Carnari woman didn't move either. She just stared at him with tired eyes full of pain and fear. "Not hate. Ross, back away now," Parker shouted. "Shoot it before it wakes up fully." But Ethan didn't shoot. He looked at her, bleeding and broken, and something inside him shifted. She wasn't a monster right now. She was just a living being on the edge of death. "She's injured," Ethan said. "We can take her in. You've lost your mind." Parker snapped. "You know what she is. They kill without mercy. They eat human hearts for fun. She's probably just pretending to be weak." "I don't think she's pretending," Ethan replied quietly. "She's dying, and we're still human, aren't we?" Parker looked like he wanted to argue, but the rest of the team stayed quiet. A few whispered to each other, sure what to do. Ethan didn't wait. He moved forward, gently lifted the Carnari woman out of the pod, and carried her in his arms like she weighed nothing. She didn't fight. She didn't growl or resist. She just looked up at him with confused, blinking eyes, like she couldn't believe he was helping her. When Ethan brought her back to the camp, the entire place stopped moving. Soldiers froze. Officers stared. Weapons were drawn before he even stepped fully into the light. "What the hell is that?" an officer shouted. "Ross, drop it now. She's not a threat," Ethan said calmly. "Not right now. She's a Carnari," another voice said with hate. "We lost entire colonies because of them." Ethan placed her on a stretcher and looked around. "I know what she is, but I also know what I saw. She didn't attack. She didn't even flinch. She's broken. If we leave her, she dies. But if we treat her, maybe we learn something we've never known before." A long silence followed. The officers looked at one another, unsure what orders to give. Finally, the commander nodded once. "Put her in a containment cell. And Ross, you're responsible." For her, Ethan nodded and followed the medics as they wheeled her away. He could hear people muttering behind him, calling him stupid, calling him soft. Some even said he was a traitor, but he didn't care. In the medical tent, the Karnari woman was scanned and treated. Machines worked quietly. Lights blinked softly. Ethan sat near the door, watching her. Rest. Her breathing was slow, and her body still looked weak. But something in her face had changed. Her jaw wasn't clenched. Her hands were not curled into claws. She looked peaceful, or maybe just tired. Later that night, as Ethan sat beside her cell, she opened her eyes again and whispered in a low, rough voice. Why? Ethan looked at her through the glass. Because everyone deserves a second chance, he said. She blinked, confused again, and slowly closed her eyes, not in fear, but in sleep. And that was the moment it all began. The war, the lies. The fear would all be challenged by one small act of mercy. Ethan sat on the edge of the metal bench, eyes fixed on the containment cell. Inside it, the Karnari female rested quietly, her body hooked to healing tubes and slow-drip fluids. The room was cold and sterile, filled with the faint hum of machines and the low flicker of dim lights. It had been 3 days since he pulled her from the battlefield. 3 days since the army branded him as reckless and unfit. He didn't care. He wasn't sorry, not even a little. The Karnari warrior, who still hadn't spoken her name, remained silent. She barely moved, barely ate, but she never took her eyes off him, not once. Whenever he entered, her gaze followed, calm, watchful, not angry. Just curious. Do you even understand me? He asked one day. Standing outside the thick glass, her golden eyes blinked once, then, slowly, she lifted a hand and tapped her chest weakly. Zayla, she said, the word harsh and broken, but clear. He stepped closer, surprised she spoke. Zayla, he repeated softly, I'm Ethan. She nodded slowly. Her voice was too weak to say more, but that single moment cracked open the wall between them. Even if just a little, outside the med bay, things were getting worse. Other soldiers spit when Ethan walked by. One man threw a bottle at him and called him a monster lover. Some laughed, some glared. Others just avoided him like he carried a disease. Ethan ignored them all. He spent his hours at Zala's side, reading reports, writing logs, and quietly talking to her, even when she didn't respond. He didn't know why he cared so much. Maybe because she reminded him of something he lost long ago. Maybe because mercy felt more human than war. Then one evening, something strange happened. The lights in the med bay flickered. A sharp alarm blared once, then died. Zayla sat up straight, her body shaking. She clutched her side and gasped in pain. Ethan rushed in. What's wrong? She pointed toward the far wall, trembling. Dreams. She muttered, not dreams, memory. He didn't understand, but he moved closer. Carefully. You're safe, Zayla. It's just a nightmare. No, she said firmly. I see. Fire. Many die, not dream. He paused. Her eyes weren't filled with fear. They were filled with warning, like she saw something coming that no one else could. Something real. What are you seeing? Ethan asked. She closed her eyes. Battlefield. Not past, future maybe. The next day. Ethan submitted a report to command. He explained what she said. That she might have visions or knowledge about something dangerous approaching. They laughed at him. One officer joked that Ethan had fallen in love with a beast. But Ethan kept writing his daily logs, and Zayla kept healing. Each day she spoke more. Her words were broken, but her thoughts were sharp. She talked about her people, not as killers, but as survivors, manipulated by a greater force. An empire that used the Karnari-like weapons. We were not born evil, she whispered one day. We were trained like machines. Ethan listened, really listened, and deep inside, he began to believe her. One night, he brought her a small data slate with images from Earth mountains, forests, oceans, kids playing in parks. Zayla stared at it for a long time, then reached out and touched the screen gently. Beautiful, she said, her voice soft and far away. No fire, no chains. He smiled. Maybe one day you'll see it for yourself. Zayla looked at him with an unreadable expression. Then, she leaned back and whispered, "You strange Ethan, most would kill me." "You feed me," he shrugged. "Maybe I'm just tired of blood. Maybe I wanted to try something different." That night, he sat by the glass until he fell asleep. When he woke up, he found something resting on the floor inside the cell, a small carved object. A symbol made from scraps. It was shaped like the sun. Her kind's ancient symbol of respect. It was her way of saying thank you, but far across the camp. The whispers grew darker. Some soldiers had had enough. They planned something, a secret. Meeting a cruel idea forming in shadows, Ethan didn't know it yet. But the real test of his mercy wasn't saving Zayla from the battlefield. It would be saving her from the hatred of his own people. And Zayla, still wounded, still feared, was about to prove just how powerful mercy could truly be. The days passed quietly, but not peacefully. Every time Ethan entered the medbay, he could feel it, the stares, the judgment, the fear. Whispers followed him like shadows. Words like traitor, fool, and monster lover were spoken in low voices, but loud enough for him to hear. Zayla knew it too. She felt the tension through the glass. She watched Ethan with eyes that had seen too much death, too much pain, and still. She said nothing, only listened, only waited. Then one night, a sharp noise shattered the stillness. Ethan was walking back from his shift when he saw it. Someone had painted the word killer in red across Zayla's cell wall. Inside, she stood still. Her face unreadable, but her hands shook just slightly. He rushed inside. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know they'd go this far." Zayla didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "Hate strong here." Ethan nodded. "Yeah. But not everyone wants you dead." She tilted her head, "Only most." That night, Ethan stayed near her cell longer than usual. He noticed something strange. Zayla had taken the scraps from her food trays and quietly carved shape symbols. Letters, some in human language, some in hers. It was a kind of message. Something she was trying to build with her hands. "You? Making something?" he asked. Zayla looked down at her hands. Then back at him. "Memory," she said. "For those who have gone." He sat down and watched her work. "Your family?" "No family," she replied. "Only fighters. All gone now." That silence between them grew deeper, not empty, but full of quiet understanding. Both of them had lost people in this war. Both of them had blood on their hands. And yet here they were, not fighting, just sitting, just being. But the camp was shifting. Soldiers had started meetings after hours. They said they were just talking, but Ethan wasn't stupid. He saw the eyes. The way some men checked their weapons twice before bed. He heard the name Zayla, spoken like a curse, followed by words like cleanup and accident. One evening, while Zayla was asleep, Ethan met with Commander Blake in private. The man looked tired, angry, and uncomfortable. "Sir," Ethan began, "you know what's happening? Some of the men want her gone. They're planning something." Commander Blake sighed. "Ross, you've put me in a difficult place. She's an enemy species. You broke protocol saving her. The only reason you're not in prison is because some higher-ups want to study her." "She's not a weapon," Ethan snapped. "She's a person, just like you and me." "Not everyone agrees," Blake said coldly. "Some think you're being manipulated, that she's got you under some alien trick." Ethan stood firm. "She saved me from nightmares without lifting a weapon. She's never once tried to hurt anyone. She just wants to live." Blake leaned back and rubbed his forehead. "I'll tighten security, but I can't stop whispers if anything happens. You better be ready." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat outside Zayla's cell. gun loaded, eyes open, waiting for footsteps, waiting for betrayal, and deep in the dark corners of the camp. Men with anger in their hearts whispered plans they thought were secret. But Zayla had sharp ears. She heard the whispers through the walls when Ethan returned to her in the morning. She said only one word. "Soon." "What do you mean?" he asked, but she only looked away. Later that day, she stood for the first time without support. Her body still hurt, but she moved like a shadow, silent and controlled. Her golden eyes scanned every inch of the medbay, as if mapping her escape, or maybe her defense. "Something's coming," she told Ethan quietly, "not from outside." From here, he didn't ask how she knew. He just believed her, and that same night, it happened. A small group of soldiers, faces covered, weapons drawn, slipped into the medbay. They thought Ethan was sleeping, but he was waiting. The door creaked. Boots hit the floor. A flashlight beam swept the room, then stopped right there. Ethan shouted. Standing with his rifle raised, "Put down your weapons." One man snarled, "Move, Ross, we're cleaning up your mess." "Not a chance." Ethan said firmly, "She's under protection. You fire one shot, and it's war in here." Then came a low growl. Not from Ethan, but from Zayla. She had stepped forward, her claws extended, eyes glowing gold. But she didn't attack. She stood beside Ethan, protecting him like he had done for her. The intruders hesitated, their courage cracked. The moments stretched thin like glass, ready to shatter. Then a loud voice came over the intercom. Commander Blake, who had been watching the cameras, "Stand down. All of you. Or face military court." The soldiers froze. Then dropped their weapons and left in silence, ashamed and defeated. After that, no one called her a monster again, not because they believed she was harmless, but because they saw what real restraint looked like. Not violence, but control. Not fear, but mercy. The camp returned to silence. But it wasn't peace. After the attack, security was tightened, patrols doubled, and access to the medbay restricted. Ethan was praised quietly by some and hated even more by others. The truth was clear. Now he had chosen her, not as a soldier's trophy or a prisoner, but as someone worth protecting. Zayla did not speak much after that night, but her eyes watched everything. She moved like someone who expected to be hunted. Every step measured, every breath quiet. She cleaned her wounds herself now, refused painkillers, and trained her broken body in slow, careful motions inside her glass cell. One morning, Ethan brought her fresh fruit instead of rations. It was a simple thing, a peace offering. She stared at the bright red apple for a long time before whispering. "First time I eat this," he smiled, sweet and simple, like earth. She nodded and took a bite. Her eyes widened just slightly, then she looked away. But he noticed her lips twitch upward for half a second. It was her version of a smile, but outside, something was coming. Not hatred this time, but danger. It started with a strange signal picked up by the camp's radar. A ship, unidentified, approaching the atmosphere at low speed. No response to hails, no insignia, just silence. And a slow, eerie descent. Commander Blake called an emergency meeting. "We're expecting a possible threat. Could be a pirate vessel, could be Karnari loyalists. We don't know. All forces to alert status." Ethan felt something deep in his chest, not fear, but recognition. He rushed to Zayla's cell. She was already standing, her eyes fixed on the distant sky visible through the small ceiling window. "You feel it too?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "I know that silence. It follows them." "Who?" he said, stepping closer. She turned to face him, her voice steady. "They are not Karnari, but they used us. They controlled the war, built us like weapons. Now they come to erase what they created." Ethan's heart sank. "They're coming for you." Zayla nodded, "And maybe for you too." Within hours, the sky cracked open with thunder. Not from nature, but engines. The foreign ship landed miles away in the wasteland, sending dust storms across the horizon. Drones were sent to scout. None returned. A scout team was deployed. 2 soldiers came back alive, burned, shaking, one repeating the same sentence. They weren't alive. They weren't alive. The camp was thrown into chaos. Fortifications were built. Turrets activated, and every soldier stood with a weapon in hand. But deep down, no one knew what they were facing, except maybe Zayla, that night. Ethan visited her one last time before the sky would catch fire again. "If things go bad, I want you to run," he said. Zayla looked at him, confused. "Run where?" "I don't care," he said. "Just survive. You're not a weapon anymore. You don't have to die for someone else's war." She stared at him a long time, then stepped forward until her hand touched the glass. "And you?" she asked. "Will you run?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. I made a choice the day I pulled you from that pod. I stand by it." She closed her eyes and whispered something in her language, something soft and old, a prayer. Maybe, or a promise. The next morning, the storm arrived, without warning. Without sound, they came on foot. Tall shapes in black armor that didn't shine, with faces hidden behind bone-like masks. They moved like ghosts, fast, perfect, unnatural. The outer wall fell in minutes. Blasters did nothing. Soldiers screamed as their minds cracked before their bodies even fell. It was not a battle, it was a slaughter. Ethan grabbed his rifle and ran toward the medbay. His heart pounded as he saw 3 black figures moving toward Zayla's cell from the shadows. She had no weapon, just her fists and fury. One of the creatures raised a strange device toward her, a glowing white core swirling in its hand. Ethan fired. The first shot missed. The second hit the creature's head. It didn't fall, but it turned, and that gave Zayla her moment. She launched herself at it with a scream that shook the entire chamber. Claws slashed, sparks flew. The creature staggered backward, and Zayla tore the core from its grip and crushed it in her palm. The others backed away, confused. Flickering like holograms losing signal, Ethan reached her side, panting. "Are you okay?" Zayla nodded, blood dripping from her arm. "Not dead yet," she said. Almost smiling, together they moved through the halls, saving who they could, leading survivors. Ethan watched Zayla fight, not like a monster but like a soldier with a cause. Every move was controlled, every strike with purpose. And the soldiers who once feared her now followed her. They didn't see a Karnari anymore. They saw a shield when the smoke cleared. Only ruins remained, but the enemy was gone, broken by something they didn't expect. Unity. A human soldier and an alien warrior, fighting not as enemies, but side by side. And in that moment, something changed in the eyes of everyone who survived. They no longer whispered monster when they looked at her. They whispered hope. They called it a victory, but Ethan didn't feel like they had one. The camp was half in ruins, bodies covered in sheets, smoke still rising from the broken walls. Medical tents overflowed with wounded soldiers. And the air smelled of fire and blood. But Zayla lived. That mattered. She stood now in the open. No longer hidden behind glass, no longer chained or guarded. Her armor was pieced together from salvaged scraps and torn fabric. Her claws still blood-stained, but her shoulders were straight, and her gaze steady. The same soldiers who once hated her now gave her silent nods. They didn't speak to her, not yet, but they didn't spit anymore. They didn't call her monster. Now they called her the Shield. Ethan watched all of this from a distance. His body was healing, but his mind was restless every time he closed his eyes. He saw the enemies again, those masked things, moving without sound, immune to pain, wiping out entire squads like shadows. In a storm, no one knew where they came from, not even Zayla. But she knew who made them. The architects, she said one night beside a dying fire. They built my kind. We were their hounds, their claws. When we stopped serving, they erased us. Why didn't you tell us before? Ethan asked. She stared at the flames, her voice quiet. Because I thought I was the last. I thought. If I stayed silent, maybe they'd forget me. He nodded slowly, but they didn't. No, she whispered. They never forget what they built that night. An emergency-come shuttle landed from Earth, carrying 2 high-ranking officers and a tribunal team. They didn't come to help. They came for judgment. Ethan stood at attention in the central tent, bruised, still limping, as the officers entered. One of them, General Whitmore, looked around the wreckage with a sour expression. You aided the enemy, Sergeant Ross, he said coldly. You harbored a Carnari, disobeyed direct orders, and risked the lives of every soldier here. Ethan didn't flinch, and I'd do it again, sir. The general raised an eyebrow. Careful what you say, son. We're talking treason. She saved lives, Ethan said firmly. She fought beside us, defended us when others ran. Another officer leaned forward. She's still Carnari. The galaxy hasn't forgotten what her kind did. Zayla stepped forward before Ethan could respond. Her voice was low but strong. My kind were soldiers, not kings. We did what we were made to do, but we were not born evil. Is that supposed to earn sympathy? Whitmore snapped. No, she replied calmly. But it should earn truth. The room fell silent. Ethan took a breath and said what no one had dared say yet. If mercy is a crime now, then maybe. We've already lost more than this war. The tribunal didn't answer right away. They requested time to review files, reports, battle recordings. They asked to interview the surviving soldiers, many of whom now had changed their minds about Zayla. She wasn't just some feared enemy anymore. She was the reason they were alive later that evening. Ethan found Zayla sitting on a rock outside camp. Watching the stars slowly return to a clear sky, he sat beside her, neither speaking at first. You think they'll kill me? She asked. Quietly, he shook his head. Not after what you did. Not anymore. She chuckled softly. I used to think death was easier, less complicated. And now? She looked at him with soft, golden eyes. Now? I wonder what peace feels like. They sat there until dawn touched the sky, and the camp slowly came back to life. By noon, the tribunal returned with a final decision. It was not death. It was not prison. It was something new. By vote of the United Military Command, General Whitmore said, reading from a datapad. Subject Zayla, of the Carnari race, is granted conditional freedom. She is to be transferred under protective custody to the Earth's diplomatic corps. For study, observation, and future cooperation, Ethan smiled quietly. Zayla said nothing. Then came the next words. Sergeant Ethan Ross is hereby removed from active duty and reassigned to accompany and supervise the subject, effective immediately. He blinked. Wait, what? The general smirked. You broke her out. Carried her across a battlefield, stood between her and your own men. Looks like you're stuck with her now. Zayla raised an eyebrow at him. Is this punishment? Ethan laughed. Feels more like babysitting. She narrowed her eyes playfully. I am no baby. They both laughed, and for the first time since war filled their skies. It sounded real. A few soldiers even smiled in the distance. In that broken camp, among ruins and loss, something new was being built, not from orders or weapons, but from trust. A human and a Carnari, not enemies, not strangers. Just to survivors choosing mercy over fear. The shuttle ride to Earth wasn't silent. But it wasn't loud either. Zayla sat beside Ethan, her golden eyes staring out the window, watching the stars drift by like forgotten memories for the first time in her life. She was leaving a war zone not as a captive, but as a guest. Ethan sat next to her, holding a tablet with orders and schedules. But he wasn't reading them. His focus stayed on her. On the way, her hands rested tightly on her lap. On the way, she tensed every time the ship made a noise. "You okay?" he asked softly. Zayla didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "Earth. Smells different in my dreams." He smiled. "Better or worse?" "Warm," she said after a moment. "Not like steel, not like death." When the shuttle landed at Earth's Edge Station, they were greeted by a small group of human diplomats, doctors, and armed escorts. Everyone looked curious, cautious, and some clearly frightened. One woman stepped forward, offering a hand to Zayla. Zayla looked at the hand, confused, then slowly reached out and shook it. It was the first handshake of her life. They were taken to a remote facility near the coastline. Not a prison, not a lab, but not exactly a home either. It had soft lights, green trees, artificial sunlight, and walls that watched without speaking. Here Zayla was safe, but still a subject, still being observed. Ethan was given a small room down the hall from her. He wasn't her guard anymore. Not officially, but he was still her bridge to this new world. They spent their mornings in joint sessions, learning history, language, culture, even humor. Zayla didn't laugh often, but when she did, it surprised the staff. It was sharp, short, and always unexpected. Like she didn't understand the joke, but enjoyed the confusion it brought. In the afternoons, Ethan walked with her through the gardens, taught her how to sit by the ocean and let the wind push against her face. At first, she hated the water, but soon she found herself dipping her feet in the cold waves, staring at the horizon like it held answers she didn't know how to ask for. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan handed her a steaming cup of tea. She sniffed it, wrinkled her nose, then took a sip and blinked in surprise. "Sweet," she said quietly. "Strange, but not bad. You're starting to like human things," he teased. Zayla gave him a sideways glance. "I like quiet. Is that human?" He chuckled. "Not really, but we're learning." But not everything was peaceful. On the third week, a message arrived, a secret communiqué intercepted by Earth's intelligence unit. It was a threat. The architects had found out where Zayla was, and they were watching. Ethan was called into a dark briefing room. There were no jokes this time, just tense faces and urgent words. "If they come, we may not survive it again," the general said. "We need to decide now, do we hide her? Or do we fight?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "We fight, but not without her." The general frowned. "You trust her that much?" "I'd trust her with my life," he said, and meant it. Meanwhile, Zayla had sensed it too. The air around her shifted. She began training in early mornings, late nights, her claws sharper, her reflexes faster. She asked for armor, for weapons. The staff resisted at first, but Ethan stepped in and made sure she got what she needed. "She's not here to be studied," he told them. "She's here to survive." Then, one night, while walking near the shoreline, Zayla finally spoke what had been burning inside her for weeks. "Do you believe I can belong here?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at the sky, then at her. "I don't know what this world believes, but I do. I think you've already earned your place." She looked away, but he saw her fingers tighten around the edge of her cloak. He saw the emotion she tried to hide. He didn't press it, didn't force anything. He just stood beside her as the waves rolled in and the stars began to blink awake above them, and deep in the darkness beyond those stars. The architects were preparing. They had seen enough. They had waited long enough. The weapon they created now stood with a human soldier, and that, to them, was the greatest betrayal. Soon, they would send a message of their own, and this time, they wouldn't just come for Zayla. They would come for Earth. The skies above Earth changed without warning. One minute, they were blue and calm. The next, they pulsed with cold light. Satellites blinked out. Comms went silent. And every defense system across Earth entered red. Alert, they had come. The architects, not in ships that burned through the sky, but in dark vessels that shimmered like shadows. Thousands of them, they hovered above the atmosphere like a second ceiling, unmoving, waiting, inside the coastal facility. Alarms rang out. Soldiers rushed to positions, defensive drones activated. And Ethan stood in the command center, gripping his weapon. Zayla was already suited up, her armor dark silver, reforged and reshaped to fit her true form. A warrior once more, but this time, on her terms. "They're not here to negotiate," Ethan said, eyes locked on the screen. "No," Zayla replied, her voice calm. "They're here to erase mistakes." The command staff panicked. Plans were scrambled, cities placed under shield domes. Military forces scrambled into orbit. But everyone knew deep down, this wasn't a battle they could win with firepower alone. Ethan turned to Zayla. "Do you have any idea how we stop them?" She stepped forward and pointed to the signal patterns. "They are not one mind, but they share one heart. You must break it, and where's the heart?" Zayla turned her head toward the sky inside. The largest ship, the one that does not blink. High Command gave the order within the hour an elite strike force would try the impossible. Sneak aboard the Architect flagship and shut it down from within. Ethan was chosen to lead it. Zayla insisted on going too. "She's not a soldier," one general protested. "No," Ethan said. "She's something more." The strike ship cut through the void like a blade, dodging the scanning lights, riding beneath the enemy's attention like a ghost as they reached. The main vessel, a docking breach, opened automatically. "They're inviting us in," one soldier whispered. "Kata." "Or they're not afraid," Ethan replied. The moment they stepped inside, the silence was louder than any scream. The halls were not metal but living, pulsing walls of organic black. Every step echoed like thunder, and the lights dimmed as if the ship itself was watching. Zayla led the way, guiding them through turns and doors without hesitation. "I know this place," she whispered. "I was born here, not from a mother, but from a machine." They reached the core chamber, and there it was, floating in the center of the room. A giant sphere of swirling energy, guarded by figures in bone-white armor. The same ones who attacked the Earth camp. Ethan raised his rifle, but Zayla raised her hand. "Let me," she said. She stepped forward alone. The figures moved, circling her, hissing in a language only she could understand. They spoke of betrayal, of disobedience, of corruption by human weakness. Zayla answered not with words, but with action. With a sudden burst of speed, she launched herself at the closest enemy. Her claws flashed, her body spun. Every move was perfect, not savage, but practiced, beautiful and deadly. Ethan and the others joined in seconds later. Laser fire lighting the chamber. The battle was chaos, but they pushed through, one enemy at a time, until Zayla reached the core. Her hands trembled as she touched it. Not from fear, but from memory. "This is where they wrote our names," she whispered, "and where I will erase them." She dug her claws into the swirling energy, screaming as the power surged through her. The core pulsed, cracked, and then shattered like glass. Above Earth, every Architect ship dimmed, then vanished, not destroyed, but turned to dust. Like forgotten nightmares in the morning sun. Back on the surface, people stared at the sky in silence. Cities opened their domes. Children ran out into the light and parents held them close. Soldiers dropped their weapons, unsure if they were dreaming. Inside the Architect ship, Zayla collapsed. Ethan caught her just in time. "You're okay," he said, his voice tight, her eyes fluttered open. "I broke their heart," she whispered. "Now I get to have mine." Ethan carried her back to the strike ship. The crew moved in silence, not out of fear, but respect. They had witnessed something none of them could explain, a legend rewriting itself in front of their eyes. Weeks passed. The Architect threat was gone. Earth declared a new alliance, one not just with planets, but with individuals, with souls that chose peace over war. Zayla was offered a home, not a cell, not a camp, but a place by the sea. Ethan moved in next door, though she often teased him that he was always watching like a protector drone. He laughed, "I just want to make sure you don't claw the neighbors." And she'd smile. A real smile, the kind only humans had taught her one evening. As the sun touched the water and the wind carried the scent of new life, Zayla sat beside Ethan and whispered, "Do you think they'll ever forget what I was, Ethan?" Looked at her, then at the horizon. "Maybe not," he said. "But they'll remember who you became." She nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "Not as a weapon, but as a person." And somewhere across the stars, the silence returned. But this time, it was peaceful.